Hey everyone, I'm your host, Peter Zablocki, and you're listening to History Shorts. I hope everyone's having a great day so far, and thank you for making this show a small part of that. If you'd like to help me out with a small gesture, please leave History Shorts a rating or a review, and click that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. For sources and books used as the basis for these episodes, how to advertise on a show, and other information such as a list of our upcoming guests on the conversation series, or a link to our Patreon account where you can listen to exclusive episodes not heard here, please visit www.historyshortspodcast.com. You could also always email me at peter@historyshortspodcast.com. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate podcast listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the globe, all in one place. Download Podcast Republic now and take your podcast experience to the next level. Having said all of that, in the hazy dawn of American Republic, as the ink dried on the Treaty of Paris and the nation emerged from the crucible of revolution, the United States stood as both a country and an idea, one still uncertain of its own shape. Boundaries were porous, loyalties divided, and the dream of unity flickered uncertainly across the smoky Appalachian ridges. It was in this vacuum, amid promises unfulfilled and power undefined, that a group of restless pioneers carved out what they hoped would become America's 14th state, the first state added after the original 13. They called it Franklin, a nod to the most celebrated American of that day, Benjamin Franklin. But history would remember it by another name, the state that almost was. Here is the rest of that story.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The story of Franklin began with both ambition and frustration. In the early 1780s, the state of North Carolina claimed a vast area of western land beyond the Appalachian Mountains, a rugged frontier that included parts of present-day eastern Tennessee. These lands were sparsely settled by European Americans, dotted with Cherokee villages, and largely cut off from the political and economic lifeblood of the coastal states. Governance was distant, protection from Native American raids was inconsistent, and roads were few and treacherous. The settlers that lived there felt quite abandoned. In 1784, North Carolina, nearly bankrupt and weary of its responsibility over such a remote region, offered to cede its western lands to the federal government to help pay off war debts. For the settlers, this act felt like betrayal. They feared that the area would be left ungoverned, or worse, sold to foreign powers. The very next year, when North Carolina reversed its decision and reclaimed the land, the settlers had had enough. Feeling politically neglected and economically orphaned, they took matters into their own hands. In August of 1784, a group of delegates met in Jonesboro, one of the frontier's few established towns, and declared independence from North Carolina. They proposed the creation of a new state, Franklin, later often spelled Frankland, meaning land of the free. In a nod to Enlightenment ideals, and with dreams of self-determination, they hoped the name would lend them legitimacy. They sent word to Benjamin Franklin himself, asking for support and possibly patronage. Ever the diplomat, Franklin responded politely, but distantly. He declined to get involved in what he rightly saw as a very delicate federal issue. Undeterred, the settlers forged ahead. In 1785, they drafted a constitution and set up a parallel government under John Sevier, a charismatic Revolutionary War hero and Indian fighter who was elected governor. Sevier, already a regional legend, became the beating heart of the Franklin movement. His leadership gave the fledgling state cohesion and confidence. The Franklin Assembly met regularly, levied taxes, negotiated with Native American tribes, and even established its own judicial system. While the settlers of Franklin saw themselves as patriots, extending the American dream westward, others saw them as dangerous separatists. The Continental Congress, still operating under the loose Articles of Confederation, this is before we have the Constitution, by the way, received Franklin's petition for statehood in 1785. It fell just short of the two-thirds vote needed. The rejection was a fatal blow. Without federal recognition, Franklin would remain an unacknowledged government, essentially a breakaway republic within a republic. Tensions with North Carolina escalated. The Eastern government sent officials to reassert control, sometimes through threats, sometimes through diplomacy. For a time, two governments operated simultaneously in the region: Franklin and North Carolina, each with its own courts, tax collectors, and militia. Some residents pledged allegiance to both, others to neither. Violence occasionally flared. In one notable incident, Franklin official arrested a North Carolina judge, only for North Carolina loyalists to then rescue him by force. It was political schizophrenia with gunpowder at the ready. Sevier, meanwhile, walked a political tightrope. He continued negotiations with Native American tribes, often outside of federal channels, seeking peace on the frontier. Yet he also knew that without recognition from either the federal government or a major ally like Georgia or Spain, Franklin was vulnerable. Rumors circulated that Sevier considered seeking foreign aid, even that he entertained overtures from Spanish agents operating out of Louisiana. In truth, it was a desperate act of realpolitik, one that underscored just how isolated Franklin truly was. By 1787, Franklin's government was unraveling. Economic hardship plagued the region. Its self-imposed taxes were quite unpopular, and the dual governance structure had led to chaos. Drought and crop failures didn't help either. Public support for Franklin began to wane, and even Sevier's star began to dim. In February of 1788, the conflict finally came to a head in what became known as the Battle of Franklin. North Carolina loyalists and Franklin supporters clashed near Greenville. No large armies, just bands of militia, and neighbors turned enemies. Shots, however, were fired, men were wounded, and Franklin's capital was raided. Sevier himself was briefly arrested. Though the conflict never reached full-scale war, the defeat signaled the end. The state of Franklin limped on for another year or two, but lost its momentum, recognition, and credibility. In 1789, the territory had fully reabsorbed into North Carolina's jurisdiction. Ironically, in that same year, North Carolina again ceded its western lands, this time permanently, to the federal government. In 1790, these lands became part of the newly created Southwest Territory, and 9 years later, in 1796, they entered the Union as the state of Tennessee. John Sevier, ever the survivor, reinvented himself. He became the first governor of Tennessee, serving multiple terms and later serving in Congress. His legacy, though complicated, is that of a pioneer who dreamed of independence and held onto it longer than most thought possible. Today, his name adorns cities, counties, and monuments across the Southeast. The state of Franklin, though it lasted barely 5 years, stands as a powerful reminder of America's early volatility, when maps were more suggestions than agreements, and when ideals of self-government clashed with the messy reality of federalism. It was not a rebellion, but a petition, not a revolution, but a plea to be seen. And though it failed to gain a star on the flag, its story lives on, in documents, battlefields, and the stubborn hills of eastern Tennessee. In many ways, Franklin was ahead of its time. Its leaders attempted to balance Enlightenment ideas with frontier necessity. Its constitution flirted with progressive ideas, including public education and freedom of religion. Their cry for representation did not always extend to all their neighbors, but their struggle, imperfect and passionate, reflects the raw spirit of American democracy in its infancy. Today, the state of Franklin survives as a ghost on a map, a flickering alternate history in which the Union might have had 14 stars before 13. Anyway, thanks for listening.